The First Army is the oldest and longest established field army of the United States Army, having seen service in both World War I and World War II, under some of the most famous and distinguished officers of the U.S. Army. It now serves as a mobilization, readiness and training command. History, establishment and World War I. First Army was established on 10 August 1918 as a field army when sufficient American military manpower had arrived in France during World War I. As an element of the American expeditionary forces in the latter stages of World War I, it was the first of 3 field armies established under the AAF. Serving in its ranks were many figures who later played important roles in World War II. First Army was inactivated in April 1919, interwar years, as part of an Army reorganization and final realization of the 1920 Amendment to the National Defense Act of 1916. Army Chief of Staff General Douglas MacArthur directed the establishment of 4 field armies that each commanded 3 core areas that were geographically located. The field armies were established to provide organizational structure for large military organizations that might be mobilized in time of national need. First Army was located in the Northeast United States and was activated on the 11th of September 1933 at Fort J. Governor's Island, New York. Initially activated as a paper army, it was commanded by General Dennis E. Nolan. Until 1942, First Army's commander was always the senior commander of one of its 3 core areas. The first core area was headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. Second core area was headquartered at Fort J. Governor's Island in New York, and Third Corps area was located at Fort Hood near Baltimore, Maryland. Since First Army was only a paper organization in its early days, its staff was the existing staff of the core areas. The overall mission of the First Army was commanding and training regular Army, Army Reserve and National Guard units in the 3 core areas. Nolan, the American Expeditionary Forces Chief of Intelligence during World War I, was followed by Major General Fox Connor, First Corps Area Commander and another AAF veteran and its Chief of Operations. In the years after World War I, Connor was a crucial mentor in the careers of Dwight Eisenhower and George C. Marshall. Passed over as a candidate for Army Chief of Staff for Douglas MacArthur, Connor retired. In 1938, First Army came under command of General Hugh A. Drum, who, along with a build-up of the Army in 1939 and through the early 1940s, began to develop First Army into a bona fide field army. It began to establish and develop its own staff and participated in the large-scale Army maneuvers in Louisiana and North Carolina between 1939 and 1941. As the United States entered World War II, Drum was assigned a new command of the newly established Eastern Defense Command, responsible for coastal and domestic defense. Drum retired in 1943 when he reached mandatory retirement age. General George Grunet, commander of 2nd Service Command, assumed command of First Army until headquarters. First Army was activated in Bristol, England in January 1944 under command of General Omar Bradley. World War II. First Army's entry into World War II began in October 1943 as Bradley returned to Washington, D.C. to receive his command and began to assemble a staff and headquarters to prepare for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy. Headquarters, First Army, was activated in January 1944 at Bristol, England. Upon going ashore on 6 June 1944, D-Day, First Army came under 21st Army Group and commanded all American ground forces during the invasion. 3 American American divisions were landed by sea at the western end of the beaches, and 2 more were landed by air. On Utah Beach the assault troops made good time, but Omaha Beach came nearest of all of the 5 landing areas to disaster. The 2 American airborne divisions that landed were scattered all over the landscape, and caused considerable confusion amongst the German soldiers, as well as largely securing their objectives, albeit with units completely mixed up with each other. 1st Army captured much of the early gains of the Allied forces in Normandy. Once the beachheads were joined up, its troops struck west and isolated the Cotentin Peninsula, and then captured Cherbourg. When the American Mulberry Harbor was wrecked by a storm, Cherbourg became even more vital. After the capture of Cherbourg, 1st Army struck south. In Operation Cobra, its forces finally managed to break through the German lines. The newly established 3rd Army was then fed through the gap and raced across France. The army then passed from the control of 21st Army Group to the newly arrived 12th Army Group. 1st Army followed 3rd Army and helped to surround the Falaise pocket. After capturing Paris, 1st Army headed towards the south of the Netherlands. When the Germans attacked during the Battle of the Bulge, 1st Army found itself on the north side of the salient, and thus isolated from 12th Army Group, its commanding authority. It was, therefore, transferred, along with 9th Army, to 21st Army Group on the 20th of December. The salient was reduced by early February 1945. Following the Battle of the Bulge, the Rhineland campaign began, and 1st Army was transferred back to 12th Army Group. In Operation Lumberjack, 1st Army closed up to the Lower Rhine by the 5th of March, and the higher parts of the river 5 days later. On the 7th of March, in a stroke of luck, Company A, 27th Armored Infantry Battalion, part of Combat Command B, found the Ludendorff Bridge across the Rhine at Remagen was still standing. It quickly captured the bridge and established a secure bridgehead. In the next 15 days, over 25,000 troops and their equipment crossed the river. By the 4th of April, an enormous pocket had been created by 1st Army and 9th Army, which contained the German Army Group B under Field Marshal model, the last significant combat force in the northwest of Germany, whilst some elements of 1st Army concentrated upon reducing the Ruhr pocket. Others headed further east, creating another pocket containing the German 11th Army. 1st Army reached the Elbe by the 18th of April. The advance halted, as that was the agreed demarcation zone between the American and Soviet forces. 1st Army and Soviet forces met on the 25th of April. In May 1945, advance elements of 1st Army headquarters had returned to New York City and were preparing to redeploy to the Pacific Theater of the War to prepare for Operation Coronet, the planned second phase of Operation Downfall, the proposed invasion of Honshu, the main island of Japan, in the spring of 1946. But the Japanese surrender in August 1945 thanks to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki terminated that effort. Post-war and peacetime missions. 1st Army returned to the United States in late 1945, first to Fort Jackson, then to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, returning to Fort J. Governor's Island, New York in the spring of 1946. 20 years later, in 1966, 1st Army relocated to Fort Meade, Maryland, and took over the responsibilities of 2nd Army, which was inactivated. In 1973, 1st Army's mission changed from training and preparation of active units to Army Reserve units. In a 1993 reorganization, 5 divisions carried out the training and support mission. 75th Division, Hughes Houston, Texas; 78th Lightning Division, Edson, New Jersey; 85th Custer Division, Arlington Heights; 87th Golden Acorn Division, Birmingham, Alabama; 91st Wild West Division, Dublin, CA. In 1993, headquarters 1st Army relocated to Fort Gillem, near Atlanta, Georgia, and became responsible for the training and mobilization of all Army Reserve and National Guard units in the United States and providing assistance to the civilian sector during national emergencies and natural disasters. In the latter role, 1st Army's contributions during the 2005 Hurricane Katrina disaster was a rare bright spot in leading federal relief efforts in the aftermath of the storm. Its commander, Russell L. Honore, a Louisiana native, became a nationally recognized figure in his direct, no-nonsense approach to disaster relief, which earned 1st Army a Joint Meritorious Unit Award. In the 21st century, 1st Army was subjected to more changes as base closures and force structures were instituted to modernize, economize and change its mission. In 2005, a Bragg decision called for the relocation of 1st Army headquarters to Rock Island Arsenal, Illinois. In 2011, its former quarters at Fort Gillem was to transition to a single national location for the mobilization and demobilization of Army National Guard and Reserve units. In a second change, as part of the 2006 transformation of the United States Army program, 1st Army exchanged its civilian assistance mission for the training and support missions for military units in the western United States formerly held by U.S. 5th Army. 5th Army then became U.S. Army North, with responsibilities for homeland defense and domestic emergency assistance. 1st Army deactivated its training divisions. This is known as a standing down. The units were reactivated as separate training brigades under two commands. 1st Army Division East, headquartered at Fort George G. Meade, Maryland, has responsibilities in all states east of the Mississippi River, and 1st Army Division West, assuming 5th Army's role and relocating from Fort Carson to its new headquarters at Fort Hood, Texas, oversees units in all states west of the Mississippi River. 1st United States Army was redesignated as 1st Army on 3 October 2006. Heraldic items. Shoulder sleeve insignia description, on a background equally divided horizontally, white and red, 3 1/4 inches high and 2 1/2 inches wide at base and 2 1/8 inches wide at top. A black block letter A, 2 3/4 inches high, 2 inches wide at base and 1 5/8 inches wide at top, all members 7/16 inch wide, all enclosed within a 1/8 inch army green border. Symbolism. The red and white of the background are the colors used in flags for armies. The letter A represents Army and is also the first letter of the alphabet, suggesting 1st Army. Quote dot. Background dot. A black letter A was approved as the authorized insignia by the commanding general, American Expedition Force, on 16 November 1918 and approved by the War Department on 5 May 1922. The background was added on 17 November 1950. Insignia description dot. A gold-color metal and enamel device 1 1/4 inches high overall, consisting of a black enamel capital letter A bearing 3 gold stars on the top crossbar and 5 gold on the center crossbar, in front of and interlaced with a gold fleur-de-lis. The vertical petal is charged in base with a red enamel arrowhead behind and extending above the letter A, and the tops of the 2 outside or flanking petals are above the crossbar extending over the vertical legs of the letter A. The lower ends of the outside petals curve under and over the lower ends of the vertical legs of the letter A and are joined together by a gold arched scroll inscribed "First Indeed" in black enamel letters. The areas within the letter A above the center crossbar are white enamel, and the areas below the crossbar are red enamel. Symbolism. The basic design was suggested by the authorized shoulder sleeve insignia of the First Army. The interlaced fleur-de-lis represent wartime service in France and alludes to the initial organization of the headquarters company as the headquarters troop. First Army-It, La Ferté-sous-Jouarre, France, 10 August 1918. The three stars at the top of the letter A are for Lorraine 1918, Street, Mahil and Musagon campaigns in which the First Army participated in World War I. The 5 stars on the center crossbar are for the Normandy, Northern France, Rhineland, Ardennes, Alsace and Central Europe campaigns in which the First Army participated in World War II. The red arrowhead referring to the assault landing on the Normandy beaches. The motto, "First Indeed," is based on the numerical designation, purpose and achievements of the 1st United States Army. Background. The insignia was approved on the 27th of January 1969. Lineage. The 1st United States Army was organized on the 10th of August 1918 in the regular army in France as headquarters and headquarters troop. 1st Army. Headquarters troop was reorganized and redesignated in September 1918 as Troop A. Headquarters Battalion, 1st Army. It saw action in the American Expeditionary Force in the latter stages of World War I and included many figures who were later to become very famous, such as Douglas MacArthur. Troop A. Headquarters Battalion, 1st Army was redesignated on the 1st of March 1919 as Headquarters Troop, 1st Army, and Headquarters Troop, 1st Army, demobilized on the 20th of April 1919 in France. 1st Army was constituted the 15th of August 1927 in the regular army as Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 7th Army, but was redesignated the 13th of October 1927 as Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 1st Army. Headquarters, 1st Army activated the 1st of October 1933 at Fort J, Governor's Island, New York. It had the mission of training army formations at the time, as did all the other field armies. Headquarters Company activated the 18th of November 1940 at Fort J, Governor's Island, New York. October 1943, Headquarters 1st Army relocated from Fort J, Governor's Island, New York to Bristol, England in anticipation of Normandy invasion. A separate 1st Army was reconstituted on the 27th of June 1944 in the regular army as Headquarters and Headquarters Company. 1st Army, concurrently consolidated with the original Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 1st Army. The consolidated unit designated as Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 1st Army. 1st Army Headquarters returns to Fort J, Governor's Island, New York in 1946. 1st Army was redesignated the 1st of January 1957 as Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 1st United States Army. Merger of 1st and 2nd Army, relocation of headquarters to Fort Meade and closure of Fort J, Governor's Island, New York announced the 20th of November 1964. The 1st of January 1966, the 1st and 2nd U.S. Armies merged and 1st Army headquarters moved to Fort Meade, Maryland. Headquarters Company and activated the 5th of June 1970 at Fort George G. Meade, Maryland, while headquarters, 1st U.S. Army, continued to function. In 1973, the 1st Army again changed its orientation to improving the readiness of the reserve components. In 1993, 1st Army headquarters was moved to Fort Gillem, Georgia. 2005, 1st Army is awarded a Joint Meritorious Unit Award for leading federal response to Hurricane Katrina. In 2006, it was announced that, subject to Base Realignment and Closure Act, Fort Gillem will eventually be closed and 1st Army headquarters relocated to Rock Island Arsenal, Illinois. The 1st of December 2006, 1st Army reorganizes and reflags its 5 reserve component training support divisions into 16 training brigades and establishes 2 subcommands: 1st Army Division East and 1st Army Division West. 1st Army East at Fort Meade, Maryland administers 8 brigades east of the Mississippi River, and 1st Army West at Fort Hood, Texas, assumes the training responsibilities with 8 brigades formerly held by U.S. 5th Army. 5th Army becomes U.S. Army North and assumes 1st Army's domestic assistance duties. 1st U.S. Army Honors Campaign Participation Credit World War I, St. Mihiel, Musaragon, Lorraine 1918. World War II, Normandy, Northern France, Battle of the Bulge, Rhineland, Ardennes, Alsace, Central Europe. Decoration Civic Actions, Joint Meritorious Unit Award for leading the federal response to Hurricane Katrina 2005. Organization, current 1st Army Division East, Fort Knox, Kentucky. 4th Sabre Cavalry Brigade, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Formerly the 85th Division's 4th Brigade. 72nd Warrior Eagle Field Artillery Brigade, Fort Meade, Maryland. Formerly the 78th Division's 5th Brigade. 157th Spartan Infantry Brigade, Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Formerly the 87th Division's 5th Brigade. 158th Warrior Infantry Brigade, Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Formerly the 87th Division's 2nd Brigade. 174th Patriot Infantry Brigade, Fort Drum, New York. Formerly the 78th Division's 2nd Brigade. 177th Mudcats Armored Brigade, Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Formerly the 87th Division's 3rd Brigade. 188th Battle Ready Infantry Brigade, Fort Stewart, Georgia. Formerly the 87th Division's 4th Brigade. 205th Bayonet Infantry Brigade, Indianapolis, Indiana. Formerly the 85th Division's 3rd Brigade. 87th Golden Acorn Army Reserve Support Command, Birmingham, Alabama. Formerly the 87th Division. 1st Army Division West, Fort Hood, Texas. 5th Armored Brigade, Fort Bliss, Texas. Formerly the 91st Division's 2D Brigade. 120th Infantry Brigade, Fort Hood, Texas. Formerly the 75th Division's 2D Brigade. 166th Aviation Brigade, Fort Hood, Texas. Formerly the 75th Division's 3D Brigade. 181st Eagle Infantry Brigade, Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. Formerly the 85th Division's 2D Brigade. 189th Bayonet Infantry Brigade, Fort Lewis, Washington. Formerly the 78th Division's 4th Brigade. 191st Infantry Brigade, Fort Lewis, Washington. Formerly the 91st Division's 4th Brigade. 402d Field Artillery Brigade, Fort Bliss, Texas. Formerly the 91st Division's 3D Brigade. 479th Field Artillery Brigade, Fort Hood, Texas. Formerly the 75th Division's 4th Brigade. List of Commanders. Gen. John J. Pershing 1918. LTG Hunter Liggett 1918 1919, MG Dennis E. Nolan 1932–1936, MG Fox Connor 1936–1938, MG Frank Ross McCoy 1938, MG James K. Parsons 1938, LTG Hugh A. Drum 1938–1943, LTG George Grunert 1943–1944, LTG Omar N. Bradley 1944, Jen Courtney H. Hodges 1944–1949, MG Roscoe B. Woodruff 1949, Jen Walter Bedell Smith 1949–1950, MG Roscoe B. Woodruff 1950, LTG Willis D. Crittenberger 1950–1952, LTG Withers A. Burris 1953–1954, LTG Thomas W. Heron 1954–1957, LTG Blackshear M. Bryan 1957–1960, LTG Edward J. O'Neill 1960–1962, LTG Garrison H. Davidson 1962–1964, LTG Robert W. Porter Jr. 1964–1965, LTG Thomas W. Dunn 1965, LTG William F. Train 1966–1967, LTG Jonathan O. Seaman 1967–1971, LTG Clary Hutchin, Jr., 1971–1973, LTG Glenn D. Walker 1973–1974, LTG James G. Callaghan 1974–1975, LTG Jeffrey G. Smith 1975–1979, LTG John F. Forrest 1979–1981, LTG Donald E. Rosenblum 1981–1984, LTG Charles D. Franklin 1984–1987, LTG James E. Thompson, Jr., 1987–1990, LTG James W. Kreisel 1990–1993, LTG John P. Oetjen 1993–1995, LTG Guy A. J. Labo 1995–1997, LTG George A. Fisher, Jr., 1997–1999, LTG John M. Riggs 1999–2001, LTG Joseph R. Inger 2001–2004, LTG Russell L. Honore 2004–2008, LTG Thomas G. Miller 2008–2011, LTG J. Michael Bednarek 2011–2013, MG Kevin R. Wendell 2013, LTG Michael S. Ducker 2013–2016, LTG Stephen M. Twitty 2016–present.